This is a data science tutorial on one of the most important modeling techniques in product and marketing data science. We're going to be talking about validating the difference in differences model. Here's a topic. Suppose your business partners want to know the impact of something, such as a feature launch or a new marketing campaign, on outcomes such as bookings or revenue. And notably, they did not run an experiment. Now, you could try to look at the outcome before the new treatment happened or and look at it afterwards, but there might be all sorts of things that happened from the pre-treatment to the post-treatment time. For example, what if they launched a new marketing campaign right during the holiday season? So one of the most common techniques is to take some treated group and you're looking for a comparison group that has not been treated, that was not affected by the campaign, was not affected by the feature launch. And importantly, you're going to use this as a comparison group, but there is an assumption to this, and that is that these two groups have parallel trends before the treatment occurred, and that trend will continue throughout the treatment, if not for the treatment itself. What do I mean by that? Suppose we had bookings in New York and California, and over time they were going like this, right? So they were trending together. And then after, let's say, the holiday season, we would expect both of them to jump up here and continue on their way. Or maybe there's both have an increasing trend in this direction, right? So they're both sort of going up. And then what happens is the treatment occurs and one of them jumps, right? And the other one is going to continue at the same trend that it was going before. So the assumption of the model is that that trend would continue over time, right? Now, we can't test this explicitly, but we can get a really good sense of whether or not they had parallel trends before the event happened. So in this data set, I pulled Google Trends search results for the keyword term Uber across all these different countries in Latin America. And now let's assume naively that Brazil, or let's assume that Brazil was the treaty group. And naively, you say, I'm just going to use Argentina as the comparison group, and I'm going to assume that they have parallel trends. So if you do this, you might set up the data, you might have a treatment dummy variable, a post dummy variable, and then the interaction of these two. You would run a simple linear model, and the interaction would be the effect of the treatment, in which case it looks like there's a sharp negative effect on Brazil. But remember, you have just assumed in this case that Argentina is a good comparison group for Brazil. And if that vertical dotted line is the event date, if we eyeball this, it's kind of not clear, right? I mean, there's part of this period right before the event happened where they were trending reasonably well together, but before that, maybe not so much. Now, we can actually test this in a better way than just looking at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take data and I'm going to limit it to all the data prior to the event date. So there's nothing in the post period. I then create a trend variable that is just stepping back by one each point in time prior to the event date. So event date time t is 0, time t minus 1 is -1, t minus 2 is -2, and so on. I then interact this trend variable with the treatment dummy, and now I run a linear regression of the KPI, the outcome of interest, on a dummy for treatment, a dummy for the trend, and then the interaction of the treatment times trend. Sorry, that trend is not a dummy; it's the continuous variable, discrete variable 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And importantly, in this case, we see treated by trend is statistically significant and negative, basically meaning that there's a statistically significant difference in the trend prior to the event. And so if these two countries were already not trending together, we really have no reason to believe that they would start to trend together going across the event date if they weren't already trending together before. So you still have options in this case. So we notice, for example, that the period, it looks like about 6 months prior to the event, that they were reasonably trending together. And if we limit the pre-period, so and again, the pre-period window is a parameter of choice. If we limit the pre-period to where it appears that they're trending together, we can pass this one validation test. So in this case, I shorten the pre-period window And now the coefficient on treated trend is positive, but is not statistically significant. Now, the important thing here is, though, just because it's not statistically significant does not mean that there is no difference in the trend, right? It just means it's not statistically significantly different than zero, but that does not mean that there is no difference in trend. At least, though, it's helpful to suggest that they're not clearly deviating. And something you could do in this case is look at that value, that difference in trend, and sort of map it out over time and see how big that effect would be. How much would that bias your coefficient of your difference in differences result if that difference in trend had continued into the future? Now, if shortening this pretreatment window didn't work, this is when you might want to look at alternatives. So maybe Argentina is not a good comparison group, but other countries are. Or maybe you get into synthetic controls. You might also add some different values, some additional independent variables into the regression, such as fixed effects, like country level fixed effects. But difference in differences modeling is one of the most commonly used techniques in the causal inference, data science, like product and marketing data science space. I have sat in interviews where I've been the interviewee and the interviewer, and talked to candidates that have used difference in differences. And I asked them about validating the model, and they say there's nothing to validate. It's just an assumption. And technically, while yes, it is an assumption that they continue the parallel trends, you absolutely should be testing whether or not they had parallel trends prior to the event happening. And there are other tests that you can do too. But for this video, we're talking about validating the parallel trends in the pretreatment period.